Journey Across Jean's Saga, Book 1. Now, Then, to Come. Part 1. Now. Chapter 1. The Átmeneti. A dotted sea of black crows, there must be over 200, nestles atop the bare trees surrounding the settlement. Their raucous chatter echoes across the naked canopy. Growing ever darker, the gnarly branches outline the dusky sky as the day's light prepares to take its nightly rest into the western horizon. Scorch off, you think as you turn over to face away from the purple and orange hues pouring through the gap in the thatched wall that acts as a window in the carefully constructed chaparral dwelling. You pull the covers over your honey face, lined with age, struggling with yourself and frustrated to be awake. You don't want the dream to end, even though it's more like a nightmare. You just need a few more minutes back in the nightmare. If only you can just reach her in time, you can save your child from the snatcher. Squawk! Stupid birds, stupid, beautiful birds. Your eyes open slowly, squinting from the narrow ray of light positioned perfectly in your line of sight. You scrunch up your eyebrows. Is it almost dusk already? The smell of yeast, pumpkin, and amaranth wafts through the air. The dwelling's outdoor cooking area is just a few paces outside the window. Your nostrils catch a whiff of the grilled dough, and instantly your mouth begins salivating. Is it already time to break the fast? It feels like you just lay down, but yes, you are hungry. Your stomach gurgles. The dimly lit room begins to come into focus as your eyes adjust to the rays of dusk light filtering through the thatch. Two other hammocks hang on either side of you, empty except for the thin, folded patchwork coverings. Besides for the birds, it's rather quiet, although, as you become more and more aware and awake, you can hear the occasional cries of children playing in the next dwelling over. As you sit up in the bed swing, you remember that it's your workshop day. You'd better get up and around. You prop your arms on either side of your body, holding the edges of the hammock, then swing your legs gracefully to the side facing the entrance to the sleep room. It's a rather small room. It's just big enough to accommodate 3 adult-sized hammocks without making it feel cramped. The entranceway to the sleep room has no hinged door, but rather a screen-like cloth drapes across the threshold. The walls of the circular room are made mostly of woven saplings and vines, and thus are various colors of browns and grays, the colors of young bark from maples, oaks, beeches, and other hardwood trees and vines. You slide off the bed swing and land on both feet. The woven nettle mat makes a scuffing sound as your feet and the mat make contact. The dirt floor underneath doesn't feel as cold as it did this time a few holds ago. Hibernation, old Vash, must be coming to an end. That means there is much work to be done. You quickly focus and decide to grab a quick bite of whatever your partner is making for breakfast. It smells divine. You need to hurry, though. The children would be arriving soon. The vet's water closet for washing up is outside to the back of the dwelling. Water is running low at the community level, so you will only wash up. Plus, there's no time for a bath. You are thirsty, so you'll fetch enough potable water to drink and clean up. Plus, the cool water will force you to wake up. You pour the jug of fresh water into the basin and lean over it, making sure not to bang your head on a piece of wood that protrudes out from the thatched wall. You close your eyes and splash water on your face. Images flash in your mind. The raid still lies heavily on your mind, and it keeps playing itself over and over again in your head. Those screams cause you to squish up your eyes and embrace yourself for the dizziness. You can remember it so clearly as if it were yesterday. It might as well have been yesterday, for there's not a day that goes by that the images and sounds of that horrible day don't come flashing back out of nowhere. The refectory area near the main entrance of the settlement was in flames. A distraction, it turns out. People woke up in a panic from their deep mid-nut slumbers, stumbling out of their dwellings. The ones closest to the communal cooking and dining area were coughing from the acrid smoke. They clumsily scattered in all directions, looking for whatever they could find to put out the fire. The smoke forced tears from their eyes, making everything twice as difficult. It was complete chaos. The overwatchers sounded the alarms like they practiced in training, clanking metallic pipes together rapidly, 3 times for a fire, 5 times for a raid. Clank, clonk, clunk. Wait a few seconds and then repeat. Only 3 times. You jumped out of your bed swing in a daze. Without much thought, you hopped off and ran out the back entrance of the dwelling, underclothes still scrunched up your legs from sleeping in a hammock. There was no time to put on your protective cloak. You grabbed the bucket of gray water from the water closet and took off toward the fire and the crowd of people desperately trying to put it out. You were halfway across the camp to the refectory when, suddenly, screams poured out from near your dwelling. Or were they coming from your own dwelling? Stop thinking about it. Focus. You have work to do. The children will be here any moment. Focus. It's been over 2 hold cycles since the raid. The attacks seem to be happening more and more frequently nowadays, but Olvash is just coming to an end. Reawakening is upon you and your fellow Átmeneti. A lot still has to be done before you begin your relocation. The last thing your people needed was a raid. Who knows when it'll happen again? It will definitely happen again. Those who feel the need to use force and violence haven't disappeared since the Great Dying. There will probably always be someone who will take what they want by force if they can, unless we find another way of coexisting. There has to be another way, you think as you dry your face with nettlecloth. Are you up, Tasht? Sibling. You hear your own voice in your head, but know that it's your partner Dolores. You note the all too familiar tug of the invisible rope as she mind speaks to you. Don't you have workshop with the children? Come eat. I made your favorite. You walk around the outside of the dwelling to the cooking area and grab a bun from the clay grill that rests on the edge of the fire pit. Its savory pumpkin filling from last harvest leaves your taste buds and belly feeling very satisfied. You kiss Dolores on the salty, cinnamon-colored cheek, smack her behind, and take off in the direction of the main garden, around 15 paces from your dwelling near the water-making shed. You pass the peacemaking house that lies to the left of the path, adjacent to the watershed. It's much the same as the other dwellings in which people sleep, except it lacks the usual dividers to segregate sleeping quarters. The oval, tent-like roof consists of layers of woven nettle canvas attached to a large beam, sculpted from a girthy thuya trunk, and chiseled to a point. 2 other pointed beams meet toward the pointy end of the main beam, creating a fork-like support structure. The bark on all 3 beams has been stripped and repurposed for use in other materials. Inside, there's a circle in session. There was a domestic dispute yesternight, and the victim and offender in question convened the peacemaking council to help resolve the conflict. These sessions are not forced upon the antagonists involved, but rather are the Átmeneti way of navigating disagreements, crime, and other types of transgressions that occur when social beings share space. Reconciliation and transformation are the goals, rather than placing blame and enacting punishment. The Peacemaking Council is a way of gathering the affected people and those close to them to come together in community to address the issue. Trying not to eavesdrop, you overhear someone saying, "Well, since you've claimed accountability for what you've done, are you ready to make amends?" You decide to give them their privacy and pick up your pace. You go to the water-making shed, watering can in hand. The water makers are busy at work, filtering and distilling the water from the barrels. This Olvash has been the wettest it has been for several years. The rain is a welcome blessing. Ishtan must be happy, you think automatically right before taking it back. You don't believe in any of that superstitious nonsense. You can see the water level in the blue rain barrel with the broken spout, and it's already half empty. There are still many seedlings to start before sowing, but you won't sow them until your people finally move to your new camp. Ugh, you think, what's the point? You're not looking forward to relocating. Hopefully more rain will come before we begin relocating our settlement. You dread the thought of not having enough water to keep the seedlings alive for the move. You set the makeshift watering can down, a 2-liter plastic bottle with pinholes poked into its lid, and twist open the spout carefully so as not to let any water escape. Although if any water does escape, the contraption is designed in such a way that water would not be wasted. The hardy potted herbs underneath would drink from the renegade drops. Thankfully, the garden isn't the main source of food for the settlement. Fungi, acorns, greens, insects, and other wild foods provide the main source of calories for the small community of 78, 77 people now, since your Ursula was taken, kidnapped by those scorching marauders who raided your encampment. But nothing can be done about that now. Nothing could have been done then, even though you tried. You searched for weeks. You never found her. Those scorching thieves are good at hiding their tracks. There's so much to do, no time to waste thinking about what could have been done differently. Forward is the direction to move, not backward. The garden gates open with a creak, more deterrent than decoration. The young'uns are starting to arrive, wearing big, toothy smiles and full of boisterous laughter. In the typical non-hierarchical fashion, they greet you, their Mester. Good breakfast, desperation, our sibling. It's common and expected to call everyone that is not your parent testver, even your partner. If you're part of a group, you'll use our before sibling, and if you're alone, my. Good breakfast to you all, edish testvericam, my sweet siblings. You reply, bringing your hands together and touching your chest as if pulling their invisible energy toward your heart. Dolores comes over into the garden with a basket full of the breakfast buns. Her long, gray hair itself is twisted up into a bun atop her head. She walks carefully as to not step on any jagged pebbles with her bare feet. The little ones go running to her, each one taking turns grabbing a warm bun, smiling and giggling with excitement. All the young'uns, except for the littlest of them, all thank Dolores, almost in chorus. Thank you, Edish Testverink, our sweet sibling. You grab another bun and kiss Dolores on the cheek again. Playfully making fun of you, 3 of the young'uns Makk kiss each other, making the others giggle in raucous laughter as Dolores walks away, blowing one last kiss to you and winking at the other children. 2 other children, siblings, about 8 and 12 reawakenings old respectively, are off to one side, no doubt silently singing as they sit cross-legged, breakfast buns clenched between their teeth. They are playing some sort of game, taking turns clapping their own hands together and then clapping the hand of the other one as if giving a high five. I went across the old river to see what I could see. They snatched me up and tied me down before I could flee. This goes on for several minutes. They giggle through a mouthful of buns. While we plant the seeds, let's tell the story of how the original 7 planted their first garden centuries ago. Who wants to go first? You look toward the eldest young'un, who is celebrating their turning 16 this upcoming reawakening. Makki, would you like to start? You know that Makk is soon going to be transitioning from what your community considers to be a child to an adult. It's a special time for Makk and their fellow 16s. When Olvash shows signs of being over, they will fetch water for the festivities while considering the pronouns they will use as adults, both having been rites of passage for almost 200 reawakenings among the Átmeneti. As adults, Makk and the other water fetchers will choose an art to pursue and gain further proficiency in. And Makk has shown signs of being rather skillful in the art of story weaving. Today is a great opportunity for them to practice that skill, while the focus of everyone is on planting seeds and not the story weaver. This way, Makk won't be the center of attention. Remember, Huri, you speak in a soft tone. Don't bury the carrot seeds too deeply. They like shallow cradles to mature in, and give them a few fingers space between each cradle hole. Planting seeds is one of your favorite activities. The magic of growing something from seed has never ceased to impress you. And yestermorning, before Nop rose high into the sky, signaling bedtime, you'd already prepared the containers, filling them with dirt. Just a few nights before that, Mokk's eggblood, Mildna, had dropped off a whole bucket load of old transparent containers that he'd scavenged from an old dump heap near the Old People's Park. They looked like some form of vessel that old people drank from before their world went to crap. Some of the flimsy polymer receptacles still show the remnants of a dark green image of a long-haired person-like creature with 2 tails encircling them. Sometimes you are gifted preserved paper cups, which are great for planting because you fill them with dirt, grow the seedling, and then plant the cups directly into the ground. These resin cups hold dirt and water very well and are lightweight, but before filling them with rich earth mixed with some of the dirt from the compost, you line the cups with leaves and leaf mold, It makes it easier to pull them out when transplanting them into the garden at the new site that you'll be moving to after the turning celebration has ended. Makk agrees to tell the story by acknowledging you silently with a slight head bow, and then promptly begins. I believe the last ones first planted their garden when they weren't quite the last ones yet. Very good memory, Makki, you comment. Makk continues. 5 of the original 7, Boots, Hack, Scrip, Telly, and Aura, had just been rescued for the umpteenth time since they had left their walled city across the vast oceans and months later ended up in Sabadpest. Telly looked down at the seedling, a kink preventing its light green and white stalk from standing upright. Per watered it anyway. After all, there was a chance that it might survive. It was a sunny morning. The wooden tables opposite the makeshift school entrance were bustling with life, a green menagerie of plants. A few cactuses, other succulents, and the seedlings that, with a bit of luck and even more love, would grow to be hardy and then transplanted into the new school garden. Tomatoes, cucumbers, marigolds, sunflowers, a ton of garlic, lettuce, spinach, the list goes on. There was even a tank with a few small goldfish and tens of tiny orange snails that the students loved to stop and point at. Per often wondered what the young'uns were talking about when they stopped in pairs or small groups and hovered over the tables, admiring the seedlings. Per linguistic proficiency was quite basic after all. Per had only been living in Sabadpest for 5 weeks. Despite the upheaval outside the barriers of the free zone, those had been the calmest 5 weeks Per had had since Per began Per journey almost a year earlier. The lacy eggshell curtain that rested on the generous windows above the tables acted as a screen, protecting the plants from the more harsh evening sun. There was even more sunshine those days. Winter was coming to an end. Smaller birds could be seen eating the seed cakes that the young ones had made back in early January. The weather was finally warming up, too. Just yesterday, Per and the young'uns were outside washing down some discarded bus tires to get them ready for painting. The plan was to make a colorful, multi-layered garden bed and fill it with vegetables and flowers. That's what the seedlings were for. Teachers, staff, and students alike walked by and admired the indoor greenhouse. It seemed like they were as excited about the garden project as they were about the uprisings popping up in different districts across the city. And, although this was the first free zone, there were rumors that more were sprouting up around the city. Parts of neighboring District 9 were planning to join them too. As Per was typing Per name on the watering schedule, the art teacher, Annie, came over and grabbed Per arm. Jerry, Telly, come here. She then led Per down the narrow hall toward the opposite wing of the school. She had something to show Per. Her smile and a twinkle in her eyes told Per that she was very proud of herself and was excited to share something that she'd found. As Per got closer to the warehouse storeroom turned art room, the overpowering presence of dust tickled Per nose, causing Per to sneeze 2, 3, then a 4th time. Ege shege dre, gesundheit. And he handed Telly a corner of the cloth. Take this. As they unfolded it, the black words painted on the white cloth banner, probably an old bedsheet, became legible. A strike, alapjog, it read. Loosely translated, it meant, striking is a basic right. That banner was just one of many that had been stored in the dusty, dimly lit closet. What a find! Eddie's smile was big and toothy. She just stumbled across a bit of history. I remember learning about the teachers' strikes that started about 100 years ago here in the city during the dark years of the Ulvam administration. At that time, banners like that could be seen hung all over schools in the city and around the country. Education workers, students, and parents had risen up in response to a recent court decision that essentially banned teachers from striking. Little did the courts expect that they were opening up a can of worms. Little had changed in 100 years. Yanni, a stern-looking but friendly English teacher from the East, shot a sly grimace at Telly. Did you imagine you'd be in such a place at such a chaotic time? She took a puff of her cigarette. I don't mind being in the middle of the action. It seems like I'm always in the middle of something, Telly smirked, stepping back a bit from the cigarette smoke as it wafted past Per. But I didn't expect to witness the beginning of a hot war just a few hundred meters away from me. The civil disobedience I'm all for. Hiding in makeshift bomb shelters is another story. You're a natural rebel, she giggled. Then out of nowhere there were Loud sounds of humming engines and whirling chuff, chuff, chuff. Yanni, Telly, and Virag, a tall, sturdy woman with short, blue highlighted blonde hair, who was just ending a phone call, her pale blue eyes as light-hued as her pale skin, looked up toward the clear blue midday sky. First one, two, then a string of 5 military helicopters in total appeared overhead, flying low. "Those are definitely not medical helicopters," Telly blurted out, barely audible over the loud chuffing. "Baw, Zeg," Virag exclaimed. "It's another show of force. How many is that today?" One after the other, the helicopters disappeared into the horizon behind the roof of the main building of the pop-up school. "They want us to know who really is in charge during this whole uprising." They all laughed uneasily. "They're after you, Telly," Yanni giggled. "They can spot a refugee when they see one." "Aren't we all refugees here?" Telly responded, ducking a bit intuitively. "A liberated zone surrounded by military and police sure has the feel of a refugee encampment. I should know. I've seen a few close up over these past months. But at least you all are doing something more here than just surviving, something intentional. I guess that's what makes this place special." Ever since the bombings that Per barely escaped from with the downhillers, Telly was unsurprisingly skittish when aircrafts flew overhead. Per never truly recovered from the post-traumatic stress. It stays with Per until Per last days. Little did Per know that Per'd be one of the few survivors during those last days. The full moon cast elongated shadow figures of mature maples that dotted the park. The rare screeching of the hover tram braking in the nearby distance signaled that the night shift was beginning. Only one set of rails was operational within the confines of the several-month-old free zone. A warm, dank breeze blew some leftover detritus from the budding bushes and plants. It smelled almost sweet after the nonstop barrage of acrid tear gas all last week that penetrated the periphery of their new home. A face mask would be helpful, but those were reserved for the various provisional medical stations scattered throughout the zone. Oh, but the sweet smells in the air. Spring had finally arrived. The temperatures had ceased to drop below freezing, and people were out and about in full force. An elderly woman with a grave face pulled at her plaid foldable grocery cart, no doubt heading home with her rations. The gravel path made the haul a bit more tricky, but she persisted toward her destination, undoubtedly blissful to be outdoors past 6 p.m. without having to wear several layers of clothing and a bulky coat. 2 other neighborhood patrol volunteers walked past Boots and Scrip, guffawing at something that must have been hilarious. The 2 newcomers waved, and the others waved back. "Servus, Servus, they greeted in return. Boots had met one of them the week before, when Faye volunteered to do morning patrol. Morning patrol, night patrol, there wasn't much difference. Those who volunteered for the patrol committee got to walk the streets of Szabadpest and get some exercise and fresh air while they were at it. The residents of the workers-occupied zone got trained on de-escalation and other important skills needed for public safety. Originally, Scrip signed up for street cleaning duty that evening, but one of their roommates in the makeshift living quarters asked Scrip if he would trade with her since she'd recently pulled a muscle in her leg and was a bit less mobile at the moment. Scrip was happy to switch, since that would give him time to hang out with Boots. Street patrol shifts were only 3 hours long, and they provided an opportunity to meet new people in the zone. Also, for the newcomer refugees, it gave them a chance to practice their languaging skills. Or not. It depended on the language toolbox, the linguistic repertoire of the patrol buddy. Since it was just Boots and Scrip together, they wouldn't be practicing the newly acquired features in their truncated linguistic repertoire. Boots looked at Fair Watch. 6 p.m. Oh, crap! I'm on kitchen cleanup duty tonight. I better skedaddle to the refectory. I'm sure they're waiting for me. Boots put out Fair's cigarette on the sidewalk, tossed the butt in the green metal bin, and began heading up the street. Where are you off to next, Scrip? I have the rest of the evening off. It's my downtime since I was on garden duty this morning with Telly and Aura. I think I'm going to take some time to reflect on the past few weeks and months. Scrib had gotten her hands on some antiquated but functional tech. It's not quite like the projections he'd been used to back home, but it worked for what he needed it for. Home. What a strange word. It seemed like forever since that night that Air and the others' lives drastically changed. When he got back to the dorm, He turned on her device and began logging. From the logs of Scrip, March 30th, 2122, Sabath Pesht, Free Zone. When people write about it in the future, and they will write about it, I'm sure of it, they'll probably call it a revolution. Since we arrived here 5 weeks ago, I've been doing a bit of reading from a set of forbidden digital archives, and the uprisings of 1848 were also later called a revolution. They weren't wrong. It is definitely an uprising, much like the one we serendipitously experienced back in Walcoke the night everything changed. I heard people back there, and here it's no different. People are tired of the same old bullcrap. Crappy pay, crap work conditions, sociopathic mega-rich people living extravagant lives while the workers barely make ends meet, technocrats profiting off the death of millions from viral pandemic after viral pandemic, walls built around entire swaths of land to keep out the desperate poor. Yeah, it's the same old story that has echoed throughout the dim corridors of history, stories kept hidden from us at the indoctrination center. Unnecessary suffering, and for what? So that some megacorp can make a profit? So that the monarchies and other not-too-distant lands can keep their royal, ridiculous lifestyles? Well, enough is enough. Again. People have already started giving it a name. Sabath Pesht, Sabath Zona, Anaris too. Le Guin's was the first and original Anaris. The name will change, that's for sure. Change is the only certainty that is everlasting, was the wisdom that Octavia E. Butler left us with before she departed this world way too early. Way too damn early. Over 100 years ago. Thank you, whoever it was that broke the law and risked their lives and that of their family members to save those antique treasures. The parable of the sowers, the parable of the talents, the dispossessed. Sabath Pesht. Whatever the name it has at the moment doesn't really matter. It's what it is that matters. It's the thing we are creating, have created, will continue to create, even if the forces of evil decide to bomb us once and for all. You can't destroy an idea. Another will always sprout from the compost of its ruins. Along Ortsiter and Fiumei Cemetery is where the first barriers went up. They were meant to keep out the traffic, especially police cars, armored tanks, and other vehicles of the traders of the working class. Drivers in the transportation industry who'd been going about their day, taking passengers around Pesht, collectively parked sky blue BKK magnetic hover buses bumper to bumper along Ortsiut and Fiumeiut from Uluiut until Kerepeshi-ut at first. Later, another line of old-school wheeled buses doubled up alongside the already parked buses, staggering the gaps, much like you'd see done with bricks on the decaying facades of the city. The numbers 28 to 28A and 62 trackless air trams that run along Kubanyayut also played an important role in the blockade efforts. A number 62 tram strategically parked itself at the intersection of Fumeiut and Kubanyayut so that no other tram could pass. Not that the unionized mechanics would. Despite being driverless or automated, there was a manual override feature that human mechanics, mostly software hackers, could use to take control of vehicles. In fact, it was the striking workers from the Transportation Union that began the first direct actions in District 8. After weeks of organizing, they decided to put a halt to the normal functioning of this part of the city. No bus, tram, train, or metro driver would think of crossing the line established by their fellow workers, except for the scabs. Scabs were outnumbered and didn't dare risk the wrath of the fellow workers. Soon, education workers and workers from other industries joined the fight. Kaleri Station, one of the city's largest transportation hubs, was a strategic point, of course, as a main vein of the city that connected it to other parts of the city and other regions of the country. Passenger as well as freight trains blocked the tracks there. Isolation was the goal. Yet, vital goods like food and supplies could still come in and out of the zone, at least until the military or some other force dismantles the tracks on the periphery. That has yet to come. Along Uluiut, from Ortsiter to Hatar-ut, drivers of fire trucks, garbage trucks, and lorries copied the bus drivers. But I haven't ventured out that far yet. There's so much to do here. No one cares that I spent the last 12 months traveling across the world in one shipping container or another. No one cares that I come from a mansion on a hill in a walled city. I think some people are suspicious of me and the others, but I've heard that these people have a history of being suspicious. Geopolitically, this region of the world has been at the heart of so many conflicts. They're rightfully worried about spy infiltration, but we are not spies. We came here in shipping containers with nothing but the clothes on our backs. We are the dispossessed, much like the ones Ursula K. Le Guin wrote about a little over 150 years ago. Nothing to give except for our mutual aid, but actually I'm not completely dispossessed. I have the books, the actual physical books. Maybe some of the only bound paper books to have survived. And I have the journals. Both kinds of relics should be in a museum. No, I take that back. They should be copied and disseminated to everyone. Their very existence is forbidden, therefore they need to be read. I must do what I can to keep them safe. They were given to me to keep safe. That is what I'll do if my life depends on it. Anyway, there's so much to document, but I'm tired. I was up early working in the garden. It's going to be beautiful. There's nothing like putting your hands in the soil. My anxiety instantly melts away when I'm working with the earth. We didn't have gardens back home. Now that I think of it, I never even knew where the food that I ate came from. I never even wondered for a second. We were brainwashed so well. Well, thankfully we're not there anymore. I don't even miss my family. I never really had a good relationship with my parents, and I'm an only child. I'll document that life some other time. Now, I just want to forget. I just want to focus on what's here, what we're creating here, this, here. Now is paramount. I'll document more about how we got here at a later time. I'm exhausted and ready for bed.